It was an early autumn morning when Sarah found herself running late. Again. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her pocket as she rushed through the crowded streets of downtown Manhattan. Her life had been a whirlwind of mundane routines lately, nothing but work, work, and more work. At 25, Sarah had long ago abandoned the dreams of fame and adventure she once cherished. Instead, she had settled into the humdrum of office life at a tech company. She worked as a junior marketing coordinator at a small but rapidly growing startup. The hours were long, the pay was modest, and the only real excitement she had come to expect was the occasional happy hour with colleagues. But, if she was being honest with herself, even those had become predictable. There was nothing left to stir the embers of her long-forgotten ambition, and she'd slowly given up on the idea of a thrilling, unconventional life. Her days had become a series of mechanical movements, each blending into the next. Until that fateful morning. Sarah dashed across the street to catch the subway, her heels clacking loudly against the pavement. She had just missed the train, and the next one wouldn't arrive for another 5 minutes. In frustration, she leaned against the cold steel pole, staring at the bustling crowd around her. People moved in all directions, some walking with purpose, others lost in their thoughts or glued to their phones. But for Sarah, it felt as though she were standing still in the middle of a world that kept turning. She closed her eyes, rubbing her temples as the weight of her life seemed to press down on her. She was tired of feeling like she was just going through the motions, tired of living a life that never seemed to change. Her dreams seemed so distant now, like something she had forgotten in a past life. It was then that she heard a soft voice next to her. "Excuse me, miss," the voice said, breaking through her spiraling thoughts. Startled, Sarah turned toward the source of the voice. Standing next to her was a man in ragged clothes, his hair unkempt and his face hidden beneath a hood. His eyes were a startling shade of blue, piercing through the dim light of the subway station. He didn't look like the typical homeless person Sarah had seen around the city. There was something different about him. "Yes?" she asked, her voice hesitant. She had heard the stories of pickpockets and scammers who targeted vulnerable people, but there was something about this man that didn't feel dangerous. I need some help," the man said, his voice trembling slightly. "I haven't eaten in days. Could you spare some change? I've been trying to find work, but no one will hire me." Sarah's heart tightened. She had seen many homeless people in the city before, some of them more aggressive than others, but there was a vulnerability in this man's tone that made her pause. She dug into her purse, pulling out the few dollars she had left. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. She handed it to him with a soft smile, hoping it would make a difference, however small. "Here you go," Sarah said, her voice kind. The man took the money with a nod, his eyes briefly meeting hers. There was a flicker of gratitude in them, but also something else, a sense of quiet resignation. "Thank you," he said. "May the world treat you kindly." As he turned to walk away, Sarah couldn't help but feel a strange tug at her heart. Something about the way he spoke, the way he carried himself despite the obvious hardships, left her with an unexpected sense of guilt. She didn't know why, but she felt compelled to do more. She could have just walked away, feeling good about herself for helping a fellow human being. But as she watched him shuffle slowly toward the corner, Sarah made a decision. "Wait!" she called after him. The man paused and turned back, his expression uncertain. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with concern. I can give you some food. There's a cafe down the street. I'll buy you something warm to eat." The man hesitated for a moment, as though unsure of her intentions. But after a long moment, he nodded. "That would be kind of you," he said quietly. Without thinking, Sarah waved down a passing cab. The man hesitated again as they approached the car, but Sarah opened the door and gestured for him to get in. She wasn't sure what was driving her at that moment, compassion, guilt, or something else, but she had already made up her mind. They sat in silence as the car drove through the busy streets of the city, the hum of traffic filling the air. Sarah couldn't help but glance at the man out of the corner of her eye. He was staring out the window, his face turned away, lost in his thoughts. Despite the state of his appearance, there was something striking about him. He carried an aura of quiet dignity that seemed at odds with his surroundings. When they arrived at the cafe, Sarah led the man inside, ordering a coffee and a sandwich for him. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was something familiar about the way he carried himself. It was as if he wasn't really homeless, as if he belonged to a world far beyond this cafe, a world that Sarah had never known. As they sat down at a small table near the window, Sarah looked at the man with renewed curiosity. "Thank you for helping me," he said as he took a sip of his coffee. "Not many people would have done that." Sarah smiled awkwardly, unsure of what to say. "It's no problem," she replied. I couldn't let you walk away without offering something more." The man gave her a small smile, his blue eyes gleaming in the soft light. He set his cup down and looked at her intently. "Maybe," he said slowly, "you've just given me more than you realize." As Sarah sipped her own coffee, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter, this seemingly insignificant moment, was about to change her life in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. But for now, she was content to sit with the stranger, sharing a quiet moment over coffee. It was the first time in a long while that she had felt connected to someone truly seen, in a way that was far beyond the ordinary encounters of her day-to-day life. The cafe was quieter now, the lunchtime rush over. A soft silence enveloped the two of them as they sat at the small table, the once hot cups of coffee cooling beside them. Sarah glanced at the man across from her, his face still hidden beneath the hood, though the faint light from the cafe's windows revealed the sharp features of his face. He hadn't said much after his cryptic words, and Sarah wasn't sure if she should press him for more, or if she should just let the conversation unfold naturally. The man broke the silence. "You know," he said softly, "I'm not really the type to ask for help. Not like this, at least." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "Then why did you?" The man hesitated, looking down at his coffee cup for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "I don't know. Something about you. You didn't look at me the way everyone else does. Most people don't see me. Or they look at me like I'm invisible, like I don't even exist." His voice held a quiet pain that made Sarah's heart ache. "But you saw me. You looked past the rags, past the dirt, and you just saw me." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't used to this kind of honesty, especially from a stranger. Something about his words, the rawness in them, made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't felt in years. I didn't do it for any particular reason," she said softly, her eyes looking into his. "I just couldn't leave you there. You seemed different, like you needed someone to treat you like a person, not just a homeless man." He smiled faintly, a soft laugh escaping his lips. "I appreciate that. Most people don't realize that we're all the same beneath the surface. We all have stories, all of us. Just some of us are more visible than others." Sarah nodded, unsure of what to say. The man's words seemed so deep, and she was suddenly aware of how much she had taken her own life for granted. Here she was, sitting with a person whose life had taken such a different path from her own. Yet in that moment, it felt like they were both searching for the same thing. Understanding, connection, some meaning to their lives. "I'm sorry," she said, feeling a little awkward. "I didn't mean to make it sound like I was pitying you. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable." The man shook his head. "No, it's not that. It's just, you don't know the last time someone treated me like I mattered." He took a slow breath, as if gathering himself. "I'm not the man I once was, and I don't expect anyone to feel sorry for me. But I do believe that kindness, even from someone like you, is worth more than anything." Sarah felt a wave of emotion rush over her, the impact of his words hitting her hard. Here she was, complaining about her dull life, the routine of her days, and this man who had nothing, was teaching her more about gratitude than she had ever learned in her whole life. "Are you?" She hesitated, unsure if she should ask. "Are you planning to stay in the city much longer?" He shifted slightly in his seat, and for the first time, he seemed to look at her with a deeper intensity. His eyes were almost too much to handle. There was a weight to them, as if he carried the burden of an entire lifetime. "No," he replied, his voice low. "I've been here long enough, and it's time to move on. But I wanted to thank you for your generosity. I've met a lot of people in this city, but very few have shown me kindness without expecting anything in return." Sarah couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss as he spoke. "You're leaving?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop herself. The man's smile faded a little, and he looked down at his coffee. "Yes, I've stayed in one place too long. I need to move on. But you've made my last stop in this city meaningful." Sarah wasn't sure why, but something inside her stirred. The idea of him walking away, disappearing as quietly as he had appeared, unsettled her. There was something about this brief encounter that felt so unfinished, so incomplete. "Where will you go?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Somewhere far away from here," he said, his voice distant, as though he were already thinking about the next chapter of his life. "I've been wandering for a long time. I suppose that's just my path." Sarah felt a pang of sadness. She didn't know this man, and yet she had spent the last hour feeling more connected to him than to anyone in her entire life. And now he was about to leave, just like everyone else, drifting out of her life without a trace. "You know," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "if you ever need anything, if you need a place to stay, I have an extra room in my apartment. It's small, but you can stay there until you get back on your feet. I mean, it's the least I could do after everything you've shared with me." The man blinked, taken aback by her offer. "You're offering me a place to stay?" he asked, his tone a mix of surprise and disbelief. Sarah nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't know why, but I just feel like I should. I'm not asking you to stay forever, just until you're ready to go." For a long moment, the man simply stared at her, his face unreadable. Then finally he spoke. "You're a good person, Sarah," he said, his voice softer than before. "But I can't stay in your life. Not like that. I'm a man with a past, and my future is complicated." She stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He stood up slowly, his movements careful, as though he were trying not to disturb the fragile moment they had shared. "I don't want to burden you with my problems. You've already done more than enough by showing me kindness." Before Sarah could say anything else, he turned and walked out of the cafe, disappearing into the bustle of the city streets. She stood there, rooted to the spot, a strange feeling in her chest, part confusion, part regret, suffocating her. What had just happened? Who was he? And why did it feel like he had just vanished without a trace, leaving her with a void that seemed impossible to fill? The answer to those questions would come soon, but not in the way Sarah had ever expected. And as she stood there, staring at the empty chair across from her, she had no idea that the encounter with this mysterious man was just the beginning of a series of events that would change her life forever. It had been 2 weeks since that day at the cafe. 2 weeks since Sarah met the man whose name she never even learned. Life had gone back to its usual routine. The same bustling office, the same long hours, the same weary commutes. Yet, something inside her felt different, unsettled. She couldn't shake the feeling of that fleeting connection, the conversation, his eyes, so full of untold stories, and the way he had walked away, disappearing into the city, as though he had never existed at all. Sarah found herself constantly thinking about him. She had wondered who he was, where he went, and why he had made the decision to leave so abruptly. Had he really been homeless? Had his past truly been as tragic as he'd hinted? Or had it all been a story, an elaborate tale woven to mask the truth? Her thoughts were interrupted one morning when a crisp envelope was slipped under her apartment door. There was no return address. It was a simple white envelope, slightly heavier than normal, with her name written on the front in elegant handwriting. She was puzzled but didn't hesitate to open it. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, embossed with a logo she didn't recognize. It read, "Dear Sarah, I hope this note finds you well. I have been meaning to speak to you about an important matter. I understand that this may come as a surprise, but I need you to meet me. I would appreciate it if you would come to my office at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, G. The letter was signed simply with the initial G. There was no other explanation or context, just an invitation. She held the letter in her hands, staring at the elegant script. For a brief moment, she wondered if it was some kind of mistake. But deep down, she knew it was him, the mysterious man from the cafe. Her heart raced as she folded the letter back into its envelope. He had asked her to meet him. But why? What could he possibly want from her? After a few moments of uncertainty, Sarah decided to take the plunge. She grabbed her coat and bag, left her apartment, and caught the subway to the address listed on the letter. The location wasn't far from her office, but the building was unfamiliar. As she stepped off the elevator and into the sleek lobby of the office building, Sarah couldn't help but feel out of place. The lobby was pristine, filled with polished marble floors, tall glass windows that stretched up to the ceiling, and expensive artwork lining the walls. The reception area was quiet, the air thick with the hum of soft classical music. The receptionist gave her a polite, professional smile as Sarah approached the desk. "How can I assist you today?" she asked. "I'm here to meet Mr. G," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "I received an invitation." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, but her smile never faltered. "Ah yes, Mr. G is expecting you. Please, follow me." Sarah followed the receptionist down a long hallway and into an office that looked like something out of a magazine. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and the large windows gave a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Behind a massive desk sat a man she didn't recognize at first. He was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his hair dark and styled with precision. He was sitting with his back to her, facing a wall of windows, and he didn't turn around as she entered. "Miss Sarah," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "I'm glad you could make it." Sarah froze. The voice was familiar. She hadn't heard it in weeks, but it felt like it was embedded in her memory. The voice of the man from the cafe. Slowly, he turned around. It was him. The same man, though he was now dressed in a fine suit, looking every bit the part of a CEO or high-powered businessman. The last 2 weeks of uncertainty and curiosity vanished in that single moment. Her heart skipped a beat as she stared at him, her mind trying to process the image in front of her. The man she had met at the cafe, the man she had assumed was just another homeless soul, was sitting in a luxury office, looking every bit the millionaire. His eyes locked with hers, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I'm sure you have many questions, Sarah. I'll answer all of them in time." Sarah swallowed hard. "I don't understand. You're... I know," he interrupted gently, his tone almost apologetic. "I've made a mess of things, and I owe you an explanation." He gestured for her to sit across from him. Hesitantly, Sarah took the seat, her mind racing. She couldn't find the words. Not yet. She still wasn't sure whether she should be angry, confused, or just plain astounded. "You see," he began, his voice low, "my name is Gabriel Blake. I'm the CEO of Blake Enterprises. You've probably heard of us. We're one of the largest tech companies in the world." The name hit her like a ton of bricks. Blake Enterprises was a name she had seen in headlines, a company she had read about in articles, but never imagined she would be sitting across from its CEO. The man she thought was a beggar, a homeless man on the streets, was none other than one of the wealthiest people in the city. "I've been living a double life," Gabriel continued, his eyes flickering with a hint of regret. "For reasons that are personal, I've been hiding from the world, hiding from my responsibilities. A few months ago, I made a decision to step away from everything and disappear for a while. I wanted to experience life without the luxuries, without the expectations. That's when I met you." Sarah was still stunned, struggling to process the revelation. You're the one I met at the cafe?" she whispered, unable to keep the shock out of her voice. He nodded. "I never intended for things to go this far. But when I met you, something changed. I haven't been able to forget that moment. The kindness you showed me, no one in my life ever does that. I wanted to see if I could do something different, something real. Sarah sat in silence for a moment, trying to make sense of everything he had just said. But why? Why didn't you tell me who you were? She asked, her voice shaking. Why pretend to be someone else? Gabriel leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. Because I needed to know if people could care about me without the title, without the money. I needed to know if anyone could see me for who I really am. And you, Sarah, you did. For the first time, Sarah began to understand. She had been a test to him, a test to see if kindness could exist outside of status, wealth, and power. And somehow, without even realizing it, she had passed. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his gaze intense. I didn't mean to deceive you, but I wanted to offer you something. You've given me something I've been missing for so long. I don't know how to repay you, but I want to. Sarah shook her head, the whirlwind of emotions too much for her to process. I didn't do anything. But Gabriel interrupted her once again, this time with a firmness that left no room for argument. You did more than you'll ever know, Sarah. More than anyone ever has. And in that moment, Sarah realized that she had stumbled into something much bigger than herself. She had no idea where this path would lead, but she knew that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The weeks following their meeting at Gabriel's office felt like a strange, surreal dream for Sarah. After learning his true identity, she had expected things to change immediately, that the man who had once seemed so distant and untouchable would suddenly transform into a confident, powerful figure who ruled his empire with the same authority he exuded in the boardroom. But that wasn't the case. Instead, Gabriel had invited her to join him for dinner several times, each time explaining his decision to step away from the world he had known. Yet despite the luxury of his lifestyle, Sarah sensed that there was more lurking beneath the surface. She couldn't help but feel that he had let down his guard only for her, a gesture that, in a way, seemed both beautiful and tragic. The man who could command boardrooms and manipulate markets was the same man who had been lost on the streets, searching for something he couldn't quite articulate. She wanted to know more about him, about what led him to make such an extreme decision. But every time she asked, Gabriel deflected, offering cryptic answers or changing the subject. But one thing was clear, he trusted her. He had allowed her to enter his world, and in doing so, he had opened a door to a reality Sarah could never have imagined. It was late one evening, about a month after that first meeting in his office, when Sarah received a text from Gabriel. It was simple, just a location. Meet me at the Blake Tower, rooftop, 9 p.m. At first, she thought it was another invitation for dinner, one of the casual get-togethers they had begun to share. But something about the message felt different, more urgent. She couldn't place why, but the idea of meeting him at the rooftop stirred something inside her. Perhaps it was the quiet intensity in his messages, or the fact that he had never invited her to such a secluded, intimate location before. She arrived at the Blake Tower just as the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, casting the city in a soft, golden glow. The building was as impressive as ever, towering above the skyline like a silent, watchful giant. The doorman greeted her with a polite smile as she entered the lobby, her heart racing despite herself. Gabriel had asked her to meet him on the rooftop. But why? As she made her way to the elevator, her mind raced with thoughts. Was this the moment where he would tell her everything? Was he finally going to open up about his life, his decisions, the struggles that had led him to abandon it all? The elevator ride felt like an eternity. The floor number clicked higher and higher, each one a reminder of the distance between the ordinary life she had lived and the extraordinary world she was about to enter. When the doors finally opened on the top floor, Sarah stepped out into the hallway, where another doorman awaited her. "Right this way, miss," he said, guiding her toward a set of double doors. He opened them with a sweep of his hand, revealing the rooftop garden beyond. The view of the city at night was breathtaking. The skyline stretched endlessly before her, lights flickering in the distance like stars that had fallen from the sky. In the center of the rooftop stood Gabriel, his figure silhouetted against the backdrop of the city lights, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she walked toward him, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. Gabriel turned when he heard her approach, and his face softened when he saw her. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, "thank you for coming." He didn't wait for her to speak, instead leading her to a small table set up for two, complete with candles and a stunning view of the city. As they sat down, the tension in the air was palpable. Gabriel's usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something darker, something that seemed to hang in the air like a storm waiting to break. "What's going on, Gabriel?" Sarah asked, her voice gentle but firm. "Why did you want to meet here at this hour? What's happening?" Gabriel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared out over the city, his hand tightening around the glass. There was something in his eyes that Sarah had never seen before. Fear, maybe? Or maybe something more complicated, something far deeper than she could understand. "I need to tell you something," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "Something I've been keeping from you." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes locked with his, waiting for him to continue. "The truth is," Gabriel started, his gaze now meeting hers, "I never really left. Not entirely. I've been hiding in plain sight, but I'm still involved with Blake Enterprises. I'm still its CEO." Sarah blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. "What do you mean?" she asked, confused. "I haven't been entirely truthful with you, Sarah," Gabriel admitted, his voice steady but regretful. "I didn't step away from the company completely. I've been hiding, staying out of the spotlight, but I'm still pulling the strings. I needed to test myself, to see if I could still be the man I used to be. And now," he sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair, "now I'm stuck. I've made decisions that have hurt people I care about. I've built this empire, but it's all built on lies." Sarah sat in stunned silence, processing his words. "You mean to say, all this time, you've been pretending to be someone else?" Her voice trembled with the realization. "You've been living this double life?" Gabriel nodded, his gaze intense. "Yes, I had to. I needed to see if anyone would see me for who I really am, or if they'd just see the CEO, the businessman. I had to know if there was anything real left in my life." The weight of his confession hit Sarah harder than she expected. It was hard to reconcile the image of the man she had met, a kind, humble soul with a quiet sadness, with the ruthless businessman standing before her now. Was he really the same person? "What are you going to do now?" Sarah asked, her voice soft, as if afraid of the answer. Gabriel looked down at his hands, the weight of the moment heavy between them. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "I thought I could keep running, keep hiding, but I can't. I've built an empire, but I've lost myself along the way. And now, I'm at a crossroads." Sarah could see the turmoil in his eyes, the inner struggle he was facing. He wasn't the man she had first met on the streets. He was someone who had lived a life filled with power, wealth, and deception. But even in the midst of it all, he was still searching for something real. "I don't know if I can fix it, Sarah," he said quietly, "but I need your help. I need you to understand why I did this. And I need you to decide whether or not you want to be a part of it." Sarah took a deep breath. The man sitting in front of her was no longer the figure of mystery and humility she had first encountered. He was someone far more complicated, someone whose actions were driven by a need to escape, to find redemption. And though it hurt to realize that the man she had started to care for had been hiding the truth from her, she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't turn away now. Gabriel had given her a choice, but it was clear, this was no longer just about a simple decision. This was about something much bigger, something that would affect not only his future but hers as well. And as Sarah sat there, looking out over the city, she knew her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet fathom. The city spread out before them like a glittering sea of lights, the vast skyline reflecting 1,000 possibilities, 1,000 untold stories. Sarah sat across from Gabriel on the rooftop, the evening air crisp and cool against her skin. The weight of his confession hung heavily between them, more potent than the whiskey in their glasses. Despite everything she had learned, everything she thought she understood about him, there was still one crucial piece missing. She didn't know how she felt about this man anymore. The raw vulnerability he had shown her during their time together felt genuine, but it was hard to reconcile that version of him with the man who had carefully orchestrated his disappearance, the CEO who had been manipulating events from the shadows. Gabriel had built his life on power, money, and control, but what was he really looking for? Could he truly escape the person he had become? Gabriel was watching her closely, his gaze intense and unwavering. "I know this changes things," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know I've lied to you, and I can't expect you to just accept that. But I need to know if there's any chance for us, any chance for me to change, to make this right." His words were soft, but there was an undercurrent of desperation. It was clear that he had reached a breaking point, and his eyes revealed the weight of the decisions he had made, the guilt he carried, and the burden of the empire he had built. The kind of burden that, despite all his wealth, had never allowed him to find peace. "I don't know, Gabriel," Sarah replied slowly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "Everything you've told me, it makes me wonder who you really are. You say you needed to test people's intentions, to see if anyone would care for you, not because of your wealth or status, but who you really are. But you've been lying to me, pretending to be someone else." Gabriel's face tightened with regret, but he didn't interrupt. He let her speak, knowing she needed to say it all. "And now, you expect me to just accept it?" Sarah continued, her voice rising a little. "You're asking me to forgive you for something that's not even about me. This is about you and your damn empire. You keep saying you want to change, but I don't know if I can believe that, not when everything you've built is based on deceit." There was a long pause as Gabriel processed her words. The air between them crackled with tension, but it wasn't angry. It was the kind of silence that filled a room with the weight of choices yet to be made. Gabriel's hands tightened around his glass, and for the first time he seemed to shrink. The invincible CEO, the man who had ruled entire industries, looked small in that moment, vulnerable, almost fragile. "I understand," he said, his voice softer than before. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness right now, Sarah. I'm not asking for anything but the chance to be honest with you. I need to tell you everything about why I started Blake Enterprises, why I built it from the ground up, why I had to hide in plain sight. I owe you that much." Sarah felt her heart soften despite her better judgment. There was no denying that Gabriel had been more open with her than anyone else in his life, even if it had come after a trail of lies. And deep down, she knew that part of her still cared about him, cared about the man he was beneath the surface, the man who had helped her see the world differently, who had opened her eyes to her own unfulfilled potential. But was that enough? "All right," Sarah said after a long pause. Tell me everything." Gabriel leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath, his eyes momentarily closing. When he opened them again, he began to speak, his voice steady but filled with the gravity of the truth he was about to reveal. "I wasn't always like this," he began, his eyes distant as if looking at something only he could see. "I grew up in a small town, far from the opulence and luxury I know now. My parents were hardworking, but they didn't have much. I had big dreams, though. I wanted to be someone who could make a real difference. But as I got older, I realized that the world doesn't work like that. Dreams are just dreams, and you have to fight for everything you want. If you're not willing to sacrifice, you don't get anywhere." Sarah listened in silence, her gaze fixed on him. She had never heard him speak like this, not in the business tone he often used, but with raw emotion, as though he was finally letting go of a lifetime's worth of pride. "When I started Blake Enterprises, it wasn't about money. Not at first. It was about proving that I could make something of myself, that I could build something meaningful. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of why I started. It became about power, about controlling everything, every situation, every person. I thought that if I could control my world, I could protect myself from ever feeling weak again." His voice cracked slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. "But it wasn't enough. The more I gained, the emptier I felt. And then I met you." His eyes met hers, his gaze softening. "When I met you, I realized that maybe I had been chasing the wrong thing all along. You didn't care about the money or the power. You didn't even know who I was at first. You just saw me. You treated me like a human being, like someone worthy of compassion. And that scared me more than anything else in my life." Gabriel paused, his eyes searching Sarah's face, as if trying to gauge her reaction. "I left everything behind to find something real, to experience life without the weight of my past decisions, without the expectations. But now I'm at a crossroads. I've hurt people, Sarah, people I care about, and I need to decide what kind of man I want to be moving forward." The city's lights twinkled below them, but Sarah didn't notice any of it. She was focused on Gabriel, on the man sitting in front of her, his mask finally falling away, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. It wasn't the man she had once thought was lost. It was a man who had been broken by his own choices, someone searching for redemption. But was it too late? Sarah leaned forward, her hands resting on the table. "I can't decide for you, Gabriel. This is something you need to figure out for yourself. I don't know if I can be the person you need me to be, but I can't walk away without knowing that you're truly ready to change. Not for me, not for anyone else, but for you. If you want to start over, you have to be ready to face the consequences of your actions." Gabriel nodded slowly, his face hardening with resolve. "I know, and I'm ready to face them. I don't expect you to forgive me right now, but I need you to know that I'm serious about this. I want to be the man I was meant to be." Sarah studied him for a moment, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could walk this road with him, if the trust could ever be rebuilt. But she also knew that this was his journey, and whatever happened, he would have to walk it alone. "I can't promise you anything," Sarah said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm willing to see where this goes. But you have to prove to me that you're not just running from your past anymore." Gabriel stood up slowly, and without another word, he reached across the table, taking her hand gently in his. "I will," he said quietly. "I will prove it to you." And as they stood together on the rooftop, the city stretching out beneath them, Sarah felt for the first time in a long while that she was no longer standing still. She was moving forward, into a future that was uncertain, but one that held more promise than the life she had known before. For better or for worse, they had both chosen to step into the unknown together.